Betrayal during pregnancy, pregnant by lover, cheated on husband, lover's child, lies in marriage, family secret, real infidelity. Words that seem to be taken from a soap opera, but are part of a true story, and an extremely painful one. Elisa was an ordinary woman. He had simple dreams, a stable life, and a love that he thought was enough. She married Marcos, a good, hard-working, kind man. Someone who would do anything for her. And he did. What Marcos didn't know, and perhaps still doesn't know, is that Elisa was carrying a secret to the altar. One that would change everything if it were revealed. She was pregnant, but the child was not his. At the time, Elisa was experiencing a whirlwind of emotions. A relationship that had cooled, a co-worker who was too attentive, and a neediness that turned into a trap. She got involved. It was once, then again. And when she decided to stop, it was too late. She was pregnant and scared. The conflict started there. Tell the truth and risk losing everything, or keep it a secret and pretend nothing happened. She chose silence. Marcos, innocent, thought that their time had finally blossomed again. He was the one who asked Elisa to marry him, with tears in his eyes, thinking that the child was the result of a reconnection, and he was the one who swore to love and protect her, without knowing that he would be raising another man's child. The question remains, is Elisa a victim of her own choices, or the executioner of those who loved her most? And you, in her place, what would you have done? Comment below. Would you have the courage to tell her? Or would you hide everything like her, like this video, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the continuation of this controversial and true story?
Hi, my name is Elisa, and I'm going to tell you everything, without hiding anything. Maybe you'll hate me in the end, or maybe you'll understand, but what I've been through. No one lives expecting to go through that. I'm a woman who made a mistake, and who still pays the price, even in silence. I met Marcos when I was still in college. He was 2 years older, already working, had life plans, and he charmed me with his calm, firm, and present manner. While other boys only wanted to party, he talked about home, family, and children. I felt safe with him. We dated for 4 years before getting married, and, at first, everything was exactly as I had dreamed, too much so. But over time, I started to fade away, and I know that this is hard to explain. We have everything and yet we feel empty. Marcos was always a good man, but he was also predictable. I saw myself there, living the same routine, day after day, without emotion, without surprise. I didn't know who I was without him anymore, and that started to bother me. It was around this time that I started working at a new office. I am a financial analyst and was called to cover maternity leave. That's when I met Daniel. Daniel was different, relaxed, funny, kind, in a kind of seductive way. He listened to me. He seemed interested in my story, in my frustrations, and I started telling him too many things that were about my marriage. At first, it was just conversation, a coffee during the break, an exchange of messages after work. But it grew. One day he pressed me against the wall in the archive room and kissed me. I pulled back, I swear, but not enough. A few days later, it happened again, and then we slept together. I cheated on Marcos. At that time, I convinced myself that it was just an escape, that I would get over it soon. But it was only when I found out I was pregnant that everything fell apart. I told Daniel, and he freaked out. He said he wasn't ready, that I was married, that I had to find a way, and he disappeared. I spent sleepless nights thinking about telling Marcos everything, but every time I looked into his eyes, I felt a lump in my throat. He was so happy with the news of the pregnancy. He cried when I showed him the test. He hugged me with so much emotion that I broke down inside. How could I tell a man who dreamed so much about being a father that the child wasn't his? I didn't tell. I kept quiet, and he proposed to me right after that. He said it was the perfect time, and I accepted. Weak, cowardly, afraid, I accepted. On the wedding day, as I walked down the aisle, I felt my whole body shaking. I thought I was going to faint. I was lying to everyone, to my family, to him, to myself. But once again, fear got the better of me, and I kept going. I got married while pregnant with Daniel, and I let Marcos believe he was the father. During my pregnancy, he was perfect. He took me to all my appointments, made plans, talked to my belly. He was so happy. I couldn't look at him without feeling guilty. When our son was born, Marcos was the one who cut the cord, the one who cried with emotion, the one who spent the night taking care of me, holding my hand, telling me how much he loved me. And there I was, with a broken heart. But time passed, and Marcos assumed that role with such truth that, for a moment, I could believe the lie. He is a wonderful father, loving, present, involved. Our son adores him. But Daniel reappeared, out of nowhere. 2 years later, he texted me saying he wanted to see the boy, that he was sure it was his. And I panicked. I deleted the message right away. I blocked his number, but it rekindled everything inside me. Would I be able to hide this forever? I started to get paranoid. I thought Marcos would find out, that someone would mention it, that Daniel might show up at my door. My fear turned into insomnia, and my guilt only grew. My husband started to notice my distance. He asked if everything was okay. I lied. I said it was stress, tiredness, but inside, I was imploding. And I know he doesn't deserve this, but the truth. I don't know what's right or wrong anymore either. Telling the truth now would mean destroying everything, taking away from my son the image he has of his father, ending the life of the man who loves me. But living with this weight is also slowly killing me. And sometimes, I look in the mirror and ask myself, until when? After that message from Daniel, my life became a minefield. At any moment, it seemed like everything could explode. I tried to maintain my routine, to make things work, but inside me it was just chaos. Poor Marcos. He continued to be the most present, most loving, most supportive man in the world. He would make coffee before he left, surprise us with flowers or ice cream at the end of the day. And me, I was pretending everything, pretending that everything was fine, pretending that I wasn't afraid, pretending that I wasn't living in a house of cards that was about to collapse. For a while, I managed to ignore that message. I convinced myself that Daniel was just trying to provoke me, that it wouldn't go any further. But one day, on my way home from the grocery store, with my son in the back seat, I saw Daniel standing on the other side of the street. He didn't do anything. He just stared, as if he was waiting for something. My heart froze. And at that moment, I knew he wasn't going to stop. That same night, when Marcos went to bed, I locked the bathroom, sat on the floor and cried like never before. I couldn't bear that weight anymore. I hadn't slept properly. I hadn't smiled for months. I was living a life that wasn't mine. And I was dragging 2 people with me who weren't to blame for anything. The next day, I decided to write a letter. It was supposed to be my way of getting it off my chest, in case I decided to disappear, or something. I needed to get it all out. I grabbed an old notebook, sat on the couch, and started writing. Marcos, if you ever read this, I hope you can still remember who I was before everything, before the mistake, before the lie. Because, despite everything, I loved you. I just lost myself. I wrote for hours, and each word hurt more than the last. I wanted him to know the truth, but without hating myself. I wanted to explain without justifying, because I knew there was no justification. It was just cowardice. I finished the letter with my heart in pieces and put it in a tissue box on top of the closet. I still didn't have the courage to give it to him, but somehow it was as if it relieved me. For a few days, things seemed lighter. I tried to be more present with my son, play with him more, enjoy what we had. But Daniel's shadows still followed me, and it didn't take long for it to appear again. One afternoon, I got an anonymous phone call at work. It was him. He said, in the coldest voice I'd ever heard, that he was going to show up at our son's school, and that he wanted to look him in the eye, that he had the right, that I couldn't deny him forever. At that moment, all I could think about was protecting my son. Not Daniel, not Marcos, just my boy. I ran to school, got him out early, and spent the rest of the day at home, locked up, staring out the window. I knew this couldn't go on. I decided to look for Daniel. I called from a blocked number and set up a coffee shop far from home. I arrived first. I was shaking inside. When he arrived, he looked the same as before, only with a darker look in his eyes. He looked me up and down without saying anything. Then he sat down. "He's my son, Eliza. I have the right to know him," he said bluntly. I remained silent for a few seconds, trying to hold back my tears, until I answered, "You disappeared when I needed you the most. You wanted me to solve everything on my own. Now, what do you want? For me to throw everything away and tell Marcos that you are the father? Do you know what that will cause?" He shrugged. "I'm not the one living a lie. You made that choice. Now deal with it." That hit me like a knife. He didn't care about the boy. It was ego. It was control. It was revenge. I stood up, looked him in the eyes, and said, "You will never get close to him. Never. If you try, I will report you. And then justice will sort it out. But what you did to me, and to him, is unforgivable." I left the cafe with shaky legs, but with a firm decision. I needed to protect my family, even if it was a family built on a lie. But what I didn't expect was what came next. 2 days later, Marcos found the letter. The box of tissues fell out of the closet when he went to get a suitcase. He saw the envelope with his name on it and read it all. When I got home, he was sitting on the couch. The look on his face, I'll never forget it. It was that of someone who had lost everything. He didn't yell. He didn't curse at me. He just handed me the letter, said thank you for the truth, and went up to his room. That night, he didn't sleep next to me. The next morning, he left the house early, before I woke up. He texted me saying he needed some time, that he was going to stay at his sister's house. And since then, he hasn't come back. I tried calling, texting. I went to his sister's house, but he didn't want to see me. She just said to me, "What did you do? You broke him, Eliza." I was left alone with my son, who was still young and didn't understand why his father wasn't home. And every night he asked, "Where's Daddy, Mommy?" And I would make up a different story. Until one day, I got tired of lying even to my son. I sat on the floor with him, held his little hands and said, "Daddy loves you very much." But he was very sad about Mommy, and he went to rest for a while. "But you didn't do anything wrong, okay?" he cried. So did I. And that day, I finally understood the extent of the pain I had caused, not just to Marcos, but to myself, to my son, to everyone. Because when we betray someone, we don't just break trust, we shatter futures. After that conversation with my son, something inside me broke completely. It was like I had spent months breathing through a straw, suffocating underwater, trying to keep everything intact. But that day, I swallowed water all at once. I drowned in my own mistakes. I started living on autopilot. I woke up, made coffee, took my son to school, came back, pretended to work, but nothing made sense. Marco's absence was a hole in the house, in the sounds, in the conversations. The silence screamed. Every corner of our home seemed to carry his presence, mixed with the pain of absence. The sofa cushion where he rested his head still had the dent from the last Sunday before everything fell apart. Time passed, and what hurt the most was the way my son was adapting to the absence of his father. It was as if he was slowly convincing himself that this was normal. He stopped asking so many questions. He stopped crying at night. But this was not a sign that he was okay. It was just his way of coping. Children have a cruel way of surviving. They get used to it. About 20 days after Marcos left, I received a message from him on my cell phone. Just one sentence. "Can I see him tomorrow?" I replied immediately, "Of course, he misses you so much. I'll pick him up from school, okay?" "He can," and that was it. Not another word. Not a single good morning. Not a single question about me. Only about our son. The next day, he showed up at the agreed time. When my son saw him, he ran as if he had received the greatest gift of his life. It was painful to see his joy contrasting with Marco's serious face. He avoided my gaze and spoke only when necessary. When they returned at the end of the day, he didn't even come in. He just left the boy at the door, gave him a quick kiss, and handed me his backpack. "He's fine. Hungry, I think. He didn't want to have dinner." "Marcos, do you have a minute?" He took a deep breath, looked to the side and replied, "Not now, Elisa," and he left. I went in, closed the door, and cried softly, leaning against the wood, without strength. He was still hurt, and rightly so. But each word he denied was a new stab in my chest. I wanted to explain. I wanted to try to mend it. But how do you mend a heart that has been torn so violently? After that, He started picking up the boy once a week, always punctual, always with the same restrained expression. He didn't come in. He didn't talk to me. And that started to become routine. We saw each other without looking at each other. And that killed me a little more every time. One day, during one of these comings and goings, I noticed that he had dropped a piece of paper on the floor when he returned his backpack. It was a receipt for a DNA test. My world stopped. There was the proof I had been dreading. He had taken the test. And now he knew. He knew the boy was not his biological son. The confirmation was there, in print. And yet, he continued to see and care for him as before. That paper burned in my hand. I ran upstairs and waited for the boy to fall asleep. I lay down next to him, looking at his peaceful little face, and asked myself, how could I have done this? How could I have dared to take away Marcos' right to know the truth from the beginning? The following week, I called Marcos myself. I asked him to come and talk, to come in, to let me explain, at least for a few minutes. Surprisingly, he accepted. She sat on the sofa, unhurriedly, but also expressionless. I stood up, nervous, my hand shaking. You know, right, I began, showing the paper. He nodded. I did it on impulse. I needed to get rid of the doubt, not that it made much difference. I already knew. I remained silent. What do you say to that, Marcos? Forgive me, not for the mistake, because I know that can't be erased, but for having lied, for having deprived you of your choice, for having involved you in a story that wasn't just ours. He crossed his arms, took a deep breath, and replied, you pulled the ground out from under me, Elisa. I'm not ready to forgive. Maybe I never will be, but I won't turn my back on him, because he's my son, even if it's not on paper, even if the blood says otherwise. I taught him how to walk, how to brush his teeth, how to apologize when he makes a mistake. That doesn't change. At that moment, I collapsed. I fell to my knees on the floor, as if my entire body was begging for forgiveness. He helped me up, but he didn't hug me. He just guided me to the couch and sat down again. Don't ask me to come back, Elisa, because I can't sleep next to you without remembering that you looked me in the eyes so many times and didn't tell the truth. I nodded. I knew he was right. What about Daniel? He asked suddenly. He wants to see the boy, but it's not out of love. It's out of ego. It's control. I swear, Marcos, he doesn't care about what's right. He just wants to ruin what little I have left. He was silent, thoughtful. After a few minutes he said, so protect him from that, and let me help. We can talk to a lawyer, understand how to protect him legally. I can file for joint custody. You continue as the mother. I continue as the father, without the other person's name involved. If you accept, of course. That took me by surprise. I didn't expect him to have the strength to be so fair, even when he was injured. But that was how he was. He always had been. Of course I accept. I appreciate that, Marcos, for being more of a man than I deserve. He didn't answer. He just got up and left. That day, I began to understand that maybe it wasn't about me anymore. That true love, the kind of love we think only exists in movies, is not the kind that forgives everything, but the kind that chooses to stay present even when everything has been broken. If you've listened this far, answer me one thing honestly. Do you think Marcos is right in wanting to stay in our son's life, even with everything that happened? Or do you think that, in his place, it would be better to cut all ties? Comment below, like this video if it touched you in any way, and share it with someone who has been through something similar. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the outcome of this true, difficult story, full of decisions that still need to be made. Marcus's decision to stay in my son's life changed everything. His presence, even though he was carrying resentment, brought a kind of stability that I no longer knew how to recognize. It was as if, even with the ground shattered, he had chosen to walk slowly through the shards, without stepping on the boy. We started talking more. At first, it was just about practical things, schedules, school, dentist, routine. But little by little, the barrier of silence became a bridge. He would send me messages saying, he did well in soccer today, or he left his math notebook with me. I'll leave it tomorrow morning. Simple things that seemed trivial, but for me they were like breathing after weeks of suffocation. Our son also started to change. He started to smile more easily again, to play, to sleep better. I could see how his soul rested when he heard Marco's voice. Even without understanding the complexity of what had happened, he felt, instinctively, that he had been chosen. that his father had decided to stay. One Saturday morning, the three of us were together in the condominium's playground. It was the first time since the separation. The boy ran, laughed loudly, jumped in the sand as if he was in paradise. Marcos and I were sitting on a bench, side by side, watching. "He looks lighter," I commented. "He's just a child. He just needed to know he wasn't abandoned." I remained silent. "He was right. And you?" he asked, without looking directly. "I'm trying, one day at a time. I still wake up crying sometimes. You know." "I know." "Me too." At that moment, the silence between us was different. It wasn't discomfort. It was acceptance. Two wounded people trying to understand what was left after the destruction. But of course, none of this meant things were resolved. A few days later, I received another message from Daniel, this time more incisive. "I want to be part of my son's life. You won't stop me. If necessary, I'll go to court." My blood ran cold. I knew this day was coming, but still, it hit me like a punch. Marcos was the first to know. Showed him the message. He was silent for a few seconds and then said firmly, "That's it. Then, we need to prepare ourselves. He won't back down. And if you think he's not capable of worse things, you're wrong." From then on, we started a process. We hired a lawyer. We told him everything, from the beginning of our relationship, through the pregnancy, to the discovery of the betrayal and the DNA test. We presented Marcus's relationship with the boy, the emotional bond, photos, videos, statements from the school, everything. The lawyer was clear. He has the legal right to request an examination, cohabitation, and even partial custody. But the fact that he has never been involved until now works against him. Marcos' socio-affective bond is a very strong point in your favor. Even so, I lived in fear. Every notification on my phone made me shiver. I knew who Daniel was. I knew he wasn't there for love. He was there for ego, for revenge, for the pleasure of control. He wanted to show that he could still affect me, and he succeeded, because fear came back to live inside me. One of the most difficult weeks, I went to pick up my son from school and he was acting strange. His head was down, quiet. He didn't want to talk. At home, he locked himself in his room. I went after him and sat on the edge of his bed. "Son, did something happen?" He hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he said, "A man called me on the way out. He said he was my father." The heart stopped. "What do you mean? What did he say?" "That he was my real father. That you lied to me. That Daddy Marcos isn't my real father." My head spun. I felt dizzy. I held back the urge to cry. I hugged my son tightly. "Son, listen carefully to what your mummy is going to tell you. A father is the one who takes care of you, the one who loves you, the one who is with you on good days and bad days, and Daddy Marcos never left you. Never. He chose you. And that is much stronger than anything. But, what about the other one? Is he my father too? He's the person who helped me bring you into the world. But that doesn't make him a father in your heart. Do you understand?" He nodded, his eyes filled with tears. That night, I called Marcos. I told him what had happened. He came right away. He sat down with our son, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Hey, listen here. You are my son. Nothing and no one will change that. Not bad words, not papers, not people who appear out of nowhere wanting to mess with your head. I am here. And I will be, always. Do you understand?" It was the first time I saw my son cry in his arms since everything came to light. The two remained embraced, breathing together. And there I saw what a real father was. Not what is part of genetics, but what holds the world on his shoulders to protect his son from everything. The next day, we filed a police report. We made a formal complaint. Our lawyer advised us to file a request for protection, prohibiting Daniel from approaching the school or the residence. The court accepted it, at least temporarily. It was not much, but it gave me a glimmer of peace. I started talking to psychologists, both for the boy and for myself. The guilt, the fear, the anxiety. Everything came in waves, and I understood that I couldn't take care of anyone if I was always falling apart inside. One night, after dropping our son off at my mother's house, Marcos and I met up to talk calmly. We sat on a bench in the square where we used to take our son to play on Sundays. It was late, the wind was cold, and the city was asleep. "Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" I asked. He looked at the sky, took a deep breath. "I don't know, but sometimes I think I'm trying. Because, as much as all this has hurt me, I still care about him. And about you. I still love you, Marcos. He lowered his head. He was silent for a while. Then he answered, you destroyed everything we built, Elisa. But even so, when I look at you, there's still a part of me that wants to rebuild. The tears came. Not just mine. His too. We stayed there, in silence, holding hands, as if they knew there was still a lot to heal. But maybe, just maybe, there is still some hope. The next few days were like walking barefoot through a minefield. I never knew when one false step would bring back the pain. Marcos and I were getting closer, yes, but with the caution of someone who has been hurt too much to give in again. There were still nights when he avoided touching me, days when his gaze would pierce me as if he were unintentionally searching for traces of the lie. And I understood. Trust, when broken, doesn't just stick back together like a glass. It becomes another object, full of cracks, but still capable of containing something inside. Our story had become this, an imperfect version of what it once was, but still with room to start over. It was in this context that I received an email from Daniel's lawyer. Formal request for paternity examination and request for visitation. Regulations. Mr. Daniel wishes to exercise his legal rights as a biological father. That text made me tremble. As much as we were preparing, as much as I knew this moment would come, it hurt. It hurt to see the coldness. It hurt to know that, for him, our son was a right, a trophy, a battlefield. I showed everything to Marcos. He read it in silence, then ran his hand over his face, as if trying to get rid of a tiredness that sleep doesn't get rid of. He will go all the way. He will drag this out in court until he succeeds. Not out of love for the boy, but because he needs to show that he still has power over you. I nodded. I knew that was it. Daniel didn't want to be a father. He wanted to win. It was as if, by forcing himself into our son's life, he could erase the pain of the abandonment he himself had caused, as if he could turn his guilt into a medal. Our lawyer explained the steps to us. The judge accepted the DNA test, which was inevitable, and the deadline for collection began to run. I explained to our son, carefully. Son, remember that man who showed up at school? He said he wanted to take a test to find out if he was your father. But I already know who my father is. I know, and nothing will change that. What's happening now is just a piece of paper, a procedure. It doesn't change who loves you, who raised you, who has been with you all this time. He remained silent. Then he asked, what if he really is my father? Will I have to go live with him? That question destroyed me inside. I took a deep breath. No one will force you to do anything, son, and no one will take you away from me. Nor from Daddy Marcos. I promised you that. A few days later, we went to the lab. The sample was collected quickly and coldly. Daniel didn't show up. He sent a representative. This confirmed everything I already knew. He didn't want to be a father. He wanted to prove something. The results took a few weeks. During that time, my head was in a whirlwind, and the worst part was that I found myself hoping the result would be negative, even though I knew it was impossible. Hope, sometimes, is a cruel trap. When it arrived, I read it alone. Genetic compatibility between samples, probability of paternity, 99.9999%. I kept the paper. I didn't show it to Marcos at that moment. I felt that, even without saying it, he already knew. Deep down, we all knew. The following week we had the first hearing. Daniel appeared, dressed in a dress shirt that tried to disguise the slovenly man behind it. He sat on the other side of the room, proud, as if he had already entered victoriously. The judge asked questions. His lawyer tried to paint a picture of a wronged father, of a remorseful man, of someone who discovered his paternity late, but now wants to make amends. I had to control myself not to laugh or cry when it was my turn to speak. I was firm. Your Excellency, this man knew about my son's existence since I was pregnant. He chose to distance himself. In 7 years, he never looked for him. He never wanted to know if he was okay, if he needed anything. And now, after so long, he shows up demanding a paper that says he's a father. But love, bond, presence, that's not built on paper. That's built over time. And Mr. Marcos, my ex-husband, was the one who fulfilled that role. From the first cry, from the first fever, from the first daddy, he is the only father my son recognizes. And I ask, with all my heart, that the justice consider this, that it considers the emotional well-being of a child who has already been through too much confusion. There was silence in the room. The judge took notes. The hearing ended without a decision. There would be more. Psychological evaluation. Social reports. The process would be long. As we left, Daniel approached. You can try to paint the story any way you want, Elisa. But the truth is, he is my son, and one day, he will know that. I stared into his eyes, unblinking. He already knows, but he also knows who left you, and who stayed. He tried to laugh, but it came out bitter. He walked away without looking back. In the following months, Marcos and I returned to couples therapy, 2 sessions with our son's psychologist. We tried to maintain a stable routine for him, outings, chores, school, bedtime stories, everything to protect his heart from further confusion. Marcos, little by little, began to sleep more nights at home. We didn't touch on the subject of going back, but we were living like someone who, little by little, remembers what it was like to be together. I cooked his favorite foods, he washed the dishes, he took care of our son with the same affection as before. And at some moments, our eyes met as before. One of those nights, after putting the boy to bed, we sat on the couch in silence. The TV was on, but neither of us paid attention. "Do you miss us?" I asked. He took his time. Then he answered, "Sometimes, but I'm afraid. Afraid of being fooled again." "I understand. What about you? Would you change anything if you could go back?" "Everything. But mostly, the silent. I should have told you, not hidden, not out of shame, but because you deserved to know." He looked at me. There was pain, but there was also something new, a kind of acceptance, as if, after so long, the suffering had turned into maturity. That night, he slept on the couch. I went to the bedroom, but at 3 in the morning, I felt the door open. It was him. He slowly lay down next to me. He hugged me from behind, and that's how we stayed. No words, no promises, just one body pressed against the other, trying to remember what it was like to be at peace. Our son woke up early. He came into the room, and, when he saw us together, he smiled. "Are you back?" Marcos answered before me. "We're trying, one day at a time." "Okay." He nodded, and in that moment, I realized, no matter how chaotic the world outside was, inside that house there was a seed of hope, a spark that could reignite everything if we knew how to take care of it. The weeks that followed that night were both silent and full of meaning. Marcos and I didn't talk about that hug in the early hours of the morning, or about the fact that we woke up together in the same room for the first time in so many months. But the way he looked at me during breakfast, the way he waited for me at night after putting our son to bed, everything said what words still didn't have the courage to confess. What united us was more than pain or regret. It was that invisible bond of those who have been through the storm and yet chose to remain, even if staggering, even if in pieces. But the calm was short-lived. Notification of the new hearing has arrived. This time, the judge would read the social worker's report and the psychological reports. This was a crucial step, and I was terrified. The psychologist's report stated, in no uncertain terms, that the boy identified Marcos as his father, and that Daniel's abrupt entry into his life would cause serious emotional damage if it was not handled with extreme care. But Daniel's lawyer had another plan. He asked a date visit supervised based on the inalienable right of coexistence between father and child. In that room, I found myself cornered. The judge, serious, with the report in his hands, sighed deeply before speaking. "In light of the psychological report and the statements of the parties, this court understands that Mr. Daniel does indeed have the right to social contact. However, this initial contact must be made in a controlled environment, with technical supervision. The child must be accompanied by a psychologist during the first meetings." My head spun. I had expected this. It was the least worst-case scenario, but still, it was like handing my child over to a stranger who wanted him, not out of love, but out of revenge. I left the room feeling the ground far away. Marcos placed his hand on my back, in a calm gesture. "It will work out, Elisa. We will protect him, always, on the first supervised visit." We all went to the specialized center, indicated by the judge. It was a room with toys, mirrors, a camera, and an attentive professional, observing everything. Daniel was nervous, but he tried to hide it. He had bought an expensive toy and brought candy, without knowing that our son was allergic to one of the substances. When the boy came in, he held my hand tightly. "Mom, do I have to go?" I knelt down to his height, just for a little while. I'll be out here, and the girl will be inside with you, taking care of everything. No one will force you to do anything, okay? He looked at Daniel, then at me. He took a deep breath and went inside. I stood outside, clutching the hem of my shirt until my fingers ached. After 30 minutes, the psychologist called us. He was uncomfortable, but he was polite. He didn't want to joke with Mr. Daniel. He only answered when asked. We need to monitor this very carefully. Any pressure could be harmful. Daniel left the place angry. That boy was trained to reject me. You've made his mind up. He's just a child, trying to understand why someone who never wanted to know about him now shows up with a toy in his hand and a smile on his face. He's not stupid, Daniel. He feels. He snorted and walked away. In the days that followed, we had to respond to new letters, new demands from the judge, and a barrage of passive-aggressive messages from Daniel's attorney. The process was draining us, financially, emotionally, spiritually. Marcos started to get sick. Nothing serious, at least not at first, but he had anxiety attacks, trouble sleeping, and loss of appetite. I can't live with this uncertainty anymore. It hurts me to see him get hurt. It hurts me not to be able to be his real father, even though he was the father of everything. How long will we have to explain ourselves? I had no answer. One night our son came to us and asked, with red eyes, Mom, why does he want to be my father now? I already have a father. I wanted to be just Daddy Marcos. I hugged him so tightly that I almost fell apart. Marcos cried for the first time in front of him, and together, lying on the living room floor, we formed a tight knot of love, pain, and fear. What sustained us was that silent truth that connected us. But justice does not listen to silence. It listens to documents. During the third supervised visit, Daniel tried to force intimacy. He called our son my champion and tried to pull him onto his lap. The boy resisted. He said he wanted to leave. The psychologist intervened. It was recorded in the report. In the end, she came to me. Elisa, I recommend a break in visits. He's not responding well. We'll ask for a re-evaluation. And I thanked him, like someone who thanks him for a sip of water in the middle of the desert. That same night, Marcos prepared dinner. It was simple. Rice, scrambled eggs, fried banana, the food he had made in our early years. As we ate in silence, he placed his hand over mine. I love you. Even with everything, I still love you. My heart stopped. I never stopped loving you, Marcos. I just got lost along the way. He smiled, a sad smile, but real. I know, and that's why. I want to go home, really, with everything, if you want me to. I responded with just a hug, and with tears, lots of tears, because I knew what that meant. It was a promise of rebuilding, of going through the fire together, and, even though we were burned, deciding to start over. The following week, we filed a formal petition. Marcos requested joint legal custody. He wanted to be legally recognized as the foster father. An important step, a fair step. The judge agreed to analyze it, and a hearing was scheduled to discuss socio-affective paternity. Daniel freaked out when he found out. He sent offensive messages. He called. He shouted, he threatened, but we didn't back down. On the day of the hearing, I took with me every photo, every report card, every record of what Marcos had done for our son, from the baby bottles to the report card with the grade 10 in science, which he celebrated as if it were a goal in the final of a championship. The judge listened, he read, he thought, and in the end he said, paternity goes beyond genetic. What makes a father is not blood, but care, bond, presence, and given the evidence and the child's clear statement, this court recognizes the socio-affective bond between the minor and Mr. Marcos. My whole body trembled. Marcos cried. I cried. Our son, who was outside, saw us leaving, hugging each other, and asked us, he finished. Marcos smiled and said, "It's started. Now it's really started." And that night, for the first time in a long time, the three of us slept together, in the same bed, with the same light sigh of someone who can finally rest. But the story is not over yet, because Daniel did not accept the decision, and in part 8, he's going to do something that will shake everything up again. Comment here. Do you think justice was finally fair? Like the video if you believe that being a father is about being present, not just giving birth. Subscribe to the channel to hear the outcome of this real, exciting, and courageous story. In the next part, Daniel's last move could ruin everything. The judge's decision had given us a relief that I never thought I would feel in that process. For a moment, it seemed like everything that was right had finally found a voice, that justice, even with its tired and tortuous pace, had recognized what our son had known for a long time, that Marcos was his father, with all the letters and feelings that this carries. But this relief lasted exactly 4 days. On the morning of the 5th, I received a notification from the forum. Daniel had filed an urgent appeal requesting nail guard of our son. The argument that the emotional bond between Marcos and the child had been forced and manipulated by me, which had alienated the boy from his biological father. And the worst part, he attached old screenshots of messages we exchanged at the time of the betrayal, trying to show that Marcos was an obstacle in our relationship. He was trying to destroy us using the past he himself helped create. When I read that document, I felt the world spin. Marcos took the paper from my hand and read it in silence. Then he looked at me with teary but firm eyes. He's desperate. This is an attack, a last kick from someone who doesn't accept losing. The problem was that this kick could hit our son. The judge would review the request within 72 hours. Fear returned to our home like a thick, suffocating fog. Our son could sense it. He didn't know the details, but he felt it. And one night, during dinner, he looked at me and said, "Mom, if he wants to take me, can I say I don't want to?" My heart stopped. "You can. You always can. You have a voice. No one can take you out of your home without hearing you, my love." He shook his head slowly and hugged the plate like a shield. On the morning of the emergency hearing, I went to court with Marcos. The lawyer said that we had a good track record, that the recognition of socio-affective paternity was recent and consistent, that Daniel's arguments bordered on bad faith. But even so, every word spoken in the room sounded like a threat. Daniel was there, wearing a suit, with a look of hatred disguised as formality. He said he had never abandoned his son, that I had prevented him from participating in his life, that Marcos was an emotional invention, and that the child needed to reconnect with his origins. The judge listened to everything, without interrupting, without showing any reaction. When it was our turn, Marcos stood up. He took a deep breath and spoke in the firmest voice I had ever heard come from him. "Your Excellency, I am not a father by DNA. I am a father by choice, by presence, by sleepless nights, by fevers and reports, by fears and joys. I was a father when no one else was, and I continue to be, because he chose me and I chose him, and there is no blood that can erase that." There was silence. The judge took a deep breath. He looked at the papers, then at us, and he said, "Request denied. Socio-affective paternity is valid and remains. Any attempt to remove the minor from the environment where he built his bonds will be considered emotional abuse. I recommend that Mr. Daniel reevaluate his approach, as insisting on nullifying already established emotional bonds may have adverse effects on his future desire for cohabitation." We left the room in silence. In the hallway, Daniel stopped me. "It won't stay like this, Elisa. It's already like this. Daniel, you had the chance. You lost it because you never tried for love. You only tried for ego." He looked at me with contempt and left, this time without shouting, without threatening, just with that bitter face of someone who loses to the truth. We returned home relieved. For the first time in months, there was nothing pending in the process. No request, no hearing, no summons. Just a final report being prepared to formalize the coexistence with Marcos as legal father. But the story wasn't over yet. One night we were in the kitchen, laughing at something silly our son had said, when I got a call from school. The coordinator, with a tense voice, explained that a man had gone there, trying to get the child. He said he was the father, and that he had authorization. But since he was not registered, and since the school had already been notified of the case, they did not allow the removal. They called the police and filed a report. It was Daniel. I tried to breathe. I tried to stay calm, but panic swallowed me. We immediately went to the police station to file a protective order. Based on the attempted illegal removal, we obtained an injunction that prevented Daniel from approaching the school, our home, or any place our son frequented, without express judicial authorization. And just like that, he disappeared. It was like a wind that loses strength and disappears. The following months were silent. No new requests. No new subpoenas. Our son is sleeping well again, smiling more. asking questions about the world and not about fear. Marcos and I finally breathed. We started taking short trips on the weekends. Simple things like ecological parks, tent camping, waterfalls near the city. It was like we were learning to live again, to love with less weight, with more presence. One afternoon, we were lying on the grass in a park, watching the sky change colors, when our son turned to me and said, "Mom, if one day I have a son, I want to be just like Daddy Marcos." I looked at Marcos. He was crying silently. So was I, because in that moment, everything was justified. All the pain, every fall, all the forgiveness. Today, Marcos is officially a father. Our son carries his name, and his soul too. Daniel never showed up again. He never contested anything again. He never tried to reverse it again. Maybe he gave up. Maybe he understood. Maybe he got tired. I don't know. I just know that, after all, life found a way to reorganize itself, to heal, to rebuild, even over the shards that cut deep. And sometimes at night, when I see the two of them sleeping on the couch after a silly movie, I smile, because I know it was all worth it. Even the pain, even the chaos. Because today, we are a family, and no one can take that away from us. Not even the